Things are happening in Indianapolis, guys. Chris Ballard is making moves. We've criticized him for it. We've questioned him for it. We've challenged him for it. And he is giving us what we've been asking for 4 years. Welcome back to the Colts Brawl podcast. I am your co-host, Michael Terrazas, by my other co-host, Cody Felger. How you doing, Cody?
Good, man. It's good to be back. We were just talking off air about last week. I was not able to be here. Was on vacation right before all the craziness happened with coronavirus. We were already down there. So it was a good week. Glad I was able to do it, but I'm also glad to be back, man. And there's a lot that's happened since I was last here. So I'm excited to talk about it today.
Oh, man, from the last time we talked together, dude, a lot has happened. The NFL world has changed. It has turned upside down. It's crazy, man. It's been exciting. It's been a little bit of a distraction from from all the negativity that's going on in the world. But definitely, man, it is an exciting time to be Colts fans right now. So why don't we just go ahead and hop into it? Last week, I went ahead and gave my 2 cents on Phillip Rivers and DeForest Buckner. Obviously, we've made a couple of more additions. We've released some guys. So real quick, I just want to get your thoughts on Phillip Rivers and DeForest Buckner. You know, that trade that happened, the signing that happened. And then we'll both, go on to talk about Sheldon Day and our newly acquired cornerback, Xavier Rhodes.
Yeah. And I'll start with Rivers because that's more of a controversial one than DeForest Buckner. But, I think right now, and I was just thinking about this today, I was like, put yourself in Chris Ballard's shoes for a second. Just think about what has happened here in terms of the quarterback position. I mean, the guy had his star quarterback retired 2 weeks before the season. He had to roll Jacoby Brissett. He really had no other options at that point. He wrote it out with Jacoby Brissett. Kind of saw, evaluated Brissett in another season with more of his kind of guys in there and more time in this offense. Obviously, in 2017, Brissett was brought in and played basically from week 2 on, kind of learning that offense. And so this is something that I think it's a good move. I like it. I also like that you're not strapped to Phillip Rivers for a couple of years. It's only a 1-year deal. I know some people maybe make a little bit of a fuss about the contract amount. But for me, I just kind of look at it. I look at Tom Brady's contract. It's about the same, really. Tom Brady just has a 2-year deal. Rivers is a 1-year deal. But he's a guy, who's a year removed from having one of the best seasons of his career. He's a guy that's familiar with Frank Reich, Nick Sirianni. It makes a lot of sense there. A lot better offensive line than the Chargers have had. I think the only question mark is, in terms of weapons, what kind of, weapons are the Colts going to bring him? And maybe that's, maybe they still grab a guy in free agency. Maybe they address it, in the draft, whatever they do. I guess it's just question marks in terms of what are the Colts going to do there. But, overall, I like that move a lot. And also moving over to DeForest Buckner, I really like this move. I think it makes a lot of sense. For me, it was definitely a move that I felt like the Colts had to make. In terms of, man, you just think about at that number 13th pick, you would get a player that you would hope, if you go defensive tackle, you would hope would be the impact player DeForest Buckner's been. DeForest Buckner, obviously a young guy. He's just turned 26. He's just entering his prime now. He's a guy who's been a first-team All-Pro. He's just really fills the biggest position of need, I felt like, on that defense. And, man, he's a guy that now, we've seen Chris Ballard try, bring in guys, but not really, Danico Autry was the guy that he brought in to play that 3 technique. Not really on a huge contract. He wasn't one of those top guys in free agency. He's tried to kind of address it with the drafting of Tyquan Lewis, but Tyquan Lewis really has not lived up to that second-round pick that Chris Ballard picked him in the second round there in 2018. So I just felt like a needed to be made there, or a move needed to be made there, rather. I felt like it was a good move, especially just with the uncertainty around the defensive line up to that point. You just think about it. Like I said, it's just something, man, where you get an impact player there at 13. Some people might argue that was way too steep to give, but I just kind of look at it as like, well, obviously the Colts felt like, some of those quarterbacks weren't going to be available there at 13. And they just felt like that deal, from what I've heard, was really just too good to pass up there. So I'm totally fine with this. I love this move. I think it makes that Colts defensive line. I've argued on my other podcast. I would say with DeForest Buckner and now with Sheldon Day, the Colts have probably the best defensive line in the AFC South, bar none. And so I love these two moves. I love the Buckner move more because you get more of a guy that what he's going to give you, as opposed to Rivers, who we've seen what he's done, right? But he's up there in age, and there's just some question marks around that. But overall, I think these moves both make sense. I think, right now in the short term, but for on paper, I think the Colts definitely improved in this offseason a lot even with the additions of those two guys. I think the Colts have definitely improved and gotten some guys, man, that, you talk about. Chris Ballard has talked about accountability. Those two guys will hold players accountable, which I think is huge in that locker room. For a locker room who really struggled to do that last year, especially the second half of the season when they were losing a bunch of games in a row, there really was a lack of accountability, kind of from what Chris Ballard has said. So overall, man, I love the moves. I think they're good moves for the Colts moving forward.
Yeah, man, good insight right there. Good insight right there. I agree with you. It was somewhat of a questionable trade, but to me, there was nothing questionable about it. It worked for both sides. Chris Ballard has longed for a 3-tech defensive tackle, and that's DeForest Buckner. He probably thinks Derek Brown is not sliding out of the top 10. Then you look at Javon Kinlaw. You can't deny the talent, but maybe him and his team have done a long, deep look into his injury history. And his injury history probably says he's going to miss some games. And he says, no, I can't have that. So what does he do? He goes out and grabs a all-pro caliber defensive tackle.
Yeah.
And it worked for both sides. The 49ers, they don't have a second, third, or fourth round pick. Maybe they can use that 13th overall pick or their 31st overall pick to gain draft capital. So that's just my quick tidbit on that. So in the last couple of days, we've had some other additions. A kind of an Indy native, not kind of an Indy native. I believe he's from Warren Central High School and played at Notre Dame. Sheldon Day.
Go Irish.
I know. Yes. Sheldon Day. I saw a clip of him in college when he went like one-on-ones in drills. When it came to the starting tackle for the 49ers right now, Mike Klinitsky or something like that.
Klinitsky, I think. Yeah, it's a hard name to pronounce. Yep.
Yeah. And he completely bulldozed him and threw him to the ground. That's good stuff right there. And he's shown some good things in the NFL. I like the signing. Again, it's a 1-year deal. I like what Chris Ballard is doing. He's bringing in talent. He's bringing in depth, but he's not committing long-term until he knows what he has completely. And that's the smart thing to do. Bring in someone rather not bring someone in at all. So with Sheldon Day, he's going to be a nose tackle. Some people are debating, he should start at nose tackle. I think you have a better idea of Sheldon Day than I do, since he's coming from, your favorite team, Notre Dame. What is your thoughts on Sheldon Day and how he fits into this defensive line? Is he going to battle for the nose tackle, or is he going to be a depth piece?
Yeah, I look at him more as a depth piece. I mean, he maybe could push for that defensive tackle starting position, but I felt like Grover Stewart really played well last year at that one tech. So, a little bit on Sheldon Day. He's a bit undersized for a defensive tackle. He's only 6'1", so I'm 6'1", so he's about my height, but he's 285. He's a guy, man, that it's kind of crazy when you think of when the Colts traded for DeForest Buckner. He's a guy that just has raw physical skills, right? He's just a guy that can beat you with his raw physical skills. Obviously, he has other things that he does, but he's just a physical freak type of player. And Sheldon Day isn't like that. He's a bit undersized for a defensive tackle. But I think one thing that he wins on and one thing that he's going to bring to this locker room and to this defensive line group is effort. He's a guy that wins on a lot of effort plays. He's a guy that's going to be a nice backup reserve for you, a guy that's put in significant snaps with the 49ers. He actually started in their 3 playoff games last year, so he's been a starter in the league. He's seen what it looks like. Dude, he was on one of the most dominant defensive lines last year, so he knows, along with DeForest Buckner, what it takes on the D-line to be, a Super Bowl caliber defensive line, a Super Bowl caliber team. And I think that's huge. I really do. I think that's huge for a couple reasons. First off, you got a lot of young guys in there outside of Justin Houston, a lot of young guys who don't have a lot of experience, at the NFL level, a lot of success at the NFL level. I mean, besides 2018 and winning a wild card game, I mean, they don't really have a whole lot. But, this just brings in some guys who can set that example for that locker room with what Chris Ballard was talking about, that lack of friction in the locker room. These are some guys, man, that can bring that to the Colts. And just another guy, another good depth piece there. I had a mock draft that I came up with a couple days ago, and it's crazy. And it's kind of funny, actually, because Chris Ballard, he addressed 2 of the positions that I wanted the Colts to take, that being cornerback and then defensive tackle. So I think it kind of helps you with the draft to address potentially some depth on the offensive line, which I think will be big. The Colts don't really have a lot of that, especially, just reserve guys. They don't really have a ton of guys that a whole lot about. So I think overall, man, these are good moves. Sheldon Day is definitely, like you mentioned, 1-year deal. You're not committed to him. He's young. He's only 25. He can just bring some youth and some juice, man, to that defensive line. So I like the move overall.
Yeah, man, that's good stuff right there. I think Sheldon Day, I do know he has a great run defense history. And being in the AFC South now with David Johnson, with Leonard Fournette, with Derrick Henry, that's going to pay dividends. That's really going to pay dividends. Mm-hmm. So we got a guy who is the alpha male on the defensive line. We got an energy guy, the Energizer Bunny. And now we're bringing in another all-pro caliber talented player. But the last couple of years, we have heard about it in the last 24 hours. He's dealt with some injuries. He has a so-called bad hip. He's a little bit slower than before. It's a 1-year deal worth $5 million. Xavier Rhodes. I like what Chris Ballard is doing, because when he's addressing the defense this free agency, you look at how the season unraveled last year. In the last 5 games of the season, where the Colts were in win now mode, where the defense had to step up, the lowest amount of points they gave up in a game was 28.
Wow. Yeah.
They gave up a lot of points on the latter half. We all know they got destroyed on Monday Night Football in front of the entire country against the Saints. Jameis Winston threw an absolute party on the Colts. Gardner Minshew threw a party on the Colts. So I love what he's doing. He knows defense is going to get this thing going. He's bringing in defensive guys that are going to elevate this defensive line. Now he's addressing the secondary. And it speaks a lot to this linebacking core, because he's not touching the linebackers. He's set. That's the one thing that I'm not stressed about, is the linebackers. Now, when you look at the secondary, you got a Rock Ya-Sin, who some people confuse me when they say Rock Ya-Sin wasn't good last year. I mean, do you remember the list of wide receivers Rock Ya-Sin went up against last year? I'm talking about Juju Smith-Schuster, Cortland Sutton, Michael Thomas, Chris Godwin, Mike Evans. You're talking about good guys like A.J. Brown. You're like guys that I can't – Julio Jones, Calvin Ridley, Mohamed Sanu. All these guys he went up against, and he held his own. In a rookie season, I definitely hope he is going to springboard in his second year. Now, Xavier Rhodes, it's a good deal. We're not paying him $15 million. We're not paying him none of that. 1-year deal, no risk, high reward. He can get healthy. if he can get healthy and he can elevate himself in this zone scheme, the Colts are in business because your safeties are locked down. I love the move. I think it's great for him. I think it's great for the Colts. He's 29 years old, so we're getting the last 2 years of his prime. Hopefully 2. I don't know. We'll see how it pans out. But, and I will say this before I give you the floor, Cody, I still think we address the cornerback spot in the draft because I love him, but you don't know what Quincy Wilson is going to give you. You do know what you have in Kenny Moore. You know what you have in Rock Ya-Sin. Well, you hope Rock Ya-Sin is going to get better and better. Xavier Rhodes is here. Marvell Tell, I think all of us can agree Marvell Tell showed us some good stuff last year. But then after that, we know what happened this year. Injuries happened. Kenny Moore missed time. Rock Ya-Sin was banged up. Pierre Desir missed a lot of time. We need guys that can come in and play. So I still think you address the cornerback spot probably in the 5th round, maybe get a Lamar Jackson from Nebraska. I really like that corner. He's long. He's fast. He's an underrated corner. Where are you with Xavier Rhodes and maybe how we address this cornerback spot going forward?
Yeah, I would definitely do the same. I would still address the cornerback position in the draft. I think Casey mentioned it. There's not a ton of depth there, not a ton of known depth there. I mean, we have no idea with Quincy Wilson sometimes. It's just like sometimes he's fantastic. Sometimes he's like, oh, man, maybe this guy's going to live up to being the 2nd-round pick in 2017. And there's other times where I'm like, what in the world is going on with Quincy Wilson? He's just like, there are times where like he's really good, and there's other times where it's like he doesn't see the field, and I'm really confused, and I don't know. But anyway, I would address it. For me with Rhodes here, I like it for a few reasons. You mentioned the 1-year deal, which I think is big, only $5 million, so it's actually cheaper than Pierre Desir. I heard reports that the Vikings were actually trying to re-sign Rhodes, but it didn't work out. And they had to cut him because he just had a huge cap, and they actually just had signed him to an extension not too long ago. So I like the move a lot. I think he's a guy, man, 2017 All-Pro, so he was one of the top corners in the league. It's not a guy that you're committed to. That's one thing I think that I like about Chris Ballard is, yeah, he'll sign some guys with question marks, but he'll sign guys not on huge deals if they do have a bunch of question marks around them. Devin Funchess last year, 1-year deal, didn't work out. They're not committed to him long term. And you see that with Chris Ballard time and time again. He doesn't do that. He doesn't put a bunch of multi-year deals so the Colts are screwed in their cap space. But he takes, like you mentioned, low risk, high reward things. Because what if Xavier Rhodes does return to that 2017 form? Well, then you got one of the, I would argue, if Rock Ya-Sin continues to ascend, Kenny Moore, best slot corner in the league, you right there have probably one of the better trios at the cornerback position. But if it doesn't work out, whatever, it's okay. It happens. You're not committed to him. You can move on next year, continue to try to address it. I love the move personally. He's the same age as Rock Ya-Sin, but I kind of look at it like this, Michael. You see kind of the ceilings of both these players, Pierre Desir, Xavier Rhodes. I feel like we already saw Pierre Desir's ceiling. I mean, he's a guy that was a 4th-round pick. He never won really any awards. He never was considered one of the top 5 players at his position. But with Xavier Rhodes, he has that kind of pedigree, right? He's the type of guy that you can bet on and say he has shown that he has the ability to be a first-team All-Pro. So, it's just kind of tapping into that. If it doesn't work out, you're totally fine. I like this move a lot. I like kind of the low risk, high reward moves that Chris Ballard does. I would love it if he does this every year with different players that have quote unquote bad seasons, whether it's injuries or other factors. I'm totally okay with this move. I like this move a lot. I think Chris Ballard, it's not like he's destroying the cap by doing this. It's $5 million. It's cheaper than Pierre Desir, and he has a higher ceiling than Pierre Desir. So I like this move a lot. I really do.
Yeah, man. I like, and piggybacking off what you said about one of the better trios in the league at corner, I'm just going to say one of the best secondaries in the NFL because we forget who's playing behind them. A young, speedy Kari Willis who can cover the field. I mean, don't get me wrong. I am not comparing him to Earl Thomas, but Kari Willis showed me flashes of Earl Thomas. Yeah. And trust me, you got a long way to go before you reach Earl Thomas status. But as a rookie playing like that, coming in week 2, we all remember he came onto the scene in week 2 against Tennessee, making some critical third down stops and everything. And then you got Malik Hooker, who we think is still a good safety. He doesn't allow too much. There's a couple of boneheaded plays, busted coverages, but not too much. So I like what Chris Ballard is doing. I love it. He said it. He said he needs to get more veteran leadership and get better players in the door. Phillip Rivers, DeForest Buckner, who just went to a Super Bowl, Sheldon Day, Xavier Rhodes. I mean, he literally tells us what he's going to do, man. He literally tells us. So we love it. That's an agreement. We love it. So moving on, we got to talk about the releases. Let go Brian Hoyer, who we all wanted, we all expected. I was praying for the release of Margus Hunt. That happened. All best of luck to him. But then this is kind of a little bit of a shocker that came onto us. Pierre Desir got let go. Brian Hoyer, let me just say this about Brian. He's now making his 10th stop in the NFL with the New England Patriots. He had a horrible, despicable game against the Miami Dolphins, the worst team one of the worst teams in the league, and he just played awful. It saved you money. You cut a body out of the quarterback room to potentially maybe bring in a rookie. And that's really that on Brian Hoyer. I mean, he's getting older. I don't really think much of him as a quarterback much. And now with Pierre Desir, it did catch me by surprise because he just got re-signed last offseason. He got an extension. And then he has the season that he has, missing some time, coming back, not playing the best. And, it did come as a surprise. It saved $6.25 million, I believe. So how did this, how did you take in the news that Pierre Desir, one of the most loved guys in the locker room, how did you take this news and what came to your mind when Pierre Desir got released?
Yeah, so I believe I was traveling back home from my vacation when I saw the news, and I was like, whoa, I did not expect that to happen, especially just with what, Pierre Desir brings to that locker room in terms of just, how good of a guy he is. Like, man, it just seems like Pierre Desir is one of those guys that Chris Ballard loves in terms of what he brings to the locker room, the type of character that he has. But, at the end of the day, he was 29 years old. You just re-signed him, like you mentioned. So you were committed to him for a few years. And I always felt like, at first I was a little bit like, what? This doesn't make any sense. But as I kind of thought about it, I was like, I kind of actually like this move. And I like this move because, Chris Ballard talked about it. He said he met with the team at the end of the year and said, when seasons like this happen, there's going to be some changes. There's going to be some turnover. And we've already seen it. We've seen it with guys, and maybe that's a little bit of a wake-up call for some of those guys on the defense. Because when you release a guy like Pierre Desir, it says, as good a guy as Pierre Desir is, he didn't perform last year. And if you're not going to perform, you're not going to be a part of this football team. I like that from Chris Ballard. It's more of a business mentality. Now, I know there are different times, like the Adam Vinatieri situation, where I felt like it was more of a because of what he's done type of thing. But overall, I think it sends that message to the locker room of like, if you're not going to perform, we're not going to make excuses for you. I know Pierre Desir was banged up, but when he played, he was not very good last year. I mean, you just look at that, a couple of those games, man. I'm thinking the New Orleans game, the Houston game. Pierre Desir got burned on a couple plays there. Granted, those are some of the best wide receivers in the league, but from your number one corner, man, you're expecting him to shut those guys down. And when he's not, I mean, it's just not going to do it. Like, no matter how good of a guy you are, at the end of the day, if you're not doing your job, you're going to get let go. And also, I just think the Colts probably weren't comfortable with an aging corner who showed some decline last year. You have him on a multi-year deal, so you don't want to commit to him long-term. And that makes sense in terms of what they also did with Xavier Rhodes. It's not like you're signing him to a 2 or 3 year deal. You're signing him to a 1 year deal, and it's a little bit cheaper. And he's a guy, like I mentioned, who has more of a ceiling. So I at first was shocked. I really did not expect it, but as I love the move personally now, and I loved what Chris Ballard did. And obviously Pierre Desir now signed with the Jets, who basically have all of the Colts cast-offs because of the obvious Rex Hogan connection there. But yeah, man, overall, I was shocked, but I like the move now, about a week or so out of it now. I kind of like the move personally.
Yeah, man, I'm with you. I did feel bad for Pierre Desir because, I think we all can agree we love Pierre Desir. He performed better than we thought he could. He got picked up literally less than 24 hours later. So it's a good thing for him. His dream still lives on. So now we're switching over to the offensive side of the ball. We've addressed the quarterback spot. We've addressed the defense. One thing we're not addressing is skill position players. Not even running backs, no tight ends. There's been rumors of Delaney Walker and the Colts being interested in each other. I don't really get the point of that move. He's older. He fell off in Tennessee. I don't know what his purpose would be in Indianapolis. I'm kind of against the move. When it comes to this wide receiver stuff, where are we at right now? Because we're not addressing anything. The last guy I probably signed who is still on the market is Demarcus Robinson. That's probably the last guy I would sign. Nelson Aguilar's gone. Robbie Anderson's gone. These guys are signed. What are we doing at the wide receiver position, man? And especially tight end, because we do need another tight end. What do you see us doing, whether if it pertains to free agency or the draft?
I think all signs point to the draft at this point. It's very telling that the Colts are interested in these guys, but they haven't really made any moves. They haven't made any moves, actually, to upgrade and to add some guys to that position. So all signs for me point to the draft. I think second round, third round, the Colts are going to take multiple guys, either wide receivers or tight ends. You got to obviously address, the offensive line depth, like I said, but overall, man, I feel like the Colts are wanting, especially with a quarterback like Phillip Rivers, to just get some young guys in there. You have some guys at the wide receiver position. I know a lot of people are saying wide receiver is like completely terrible for the Colts. I don't think that's the case, honestly. I just think a lot of guys were injured last year. I thought Zach Pascal had a nice season, all things considered. Paris Campbell, he's a guy that was injured a lot last year but showed you flashes. We know what T.Y. Hilton can bring. You got 3 guys right there. Reese Fountain, the guy who was kind of turning it up in the preseason, then got injured, was out for the year. So you have some potential there. I think you still need to obviously address it in the draft. I think in the second round, the Colts will take a wide receiver with either 34 or 44 if they don't trade out. But I think some of the guys, there are multiple guys there. This is a very deep wide receiver class, so I think the Colts would take a couple wide receivers. I think you address the tight end. I would honestly do that in the second to third round. Just get a bunch of skill positions. Just build around Phillip Rivers for this year and maybe try to address the quarterback position next year. I know that could be maybe controversial for some people, but I'm okay, man, with just loading up. The Colts obviously are wanting to win now with some of their recent moves. And so I think what you need to do, man, in this draft, if you don't sign anybody in free agency, and even if you do, you still got to address that wide receiver position multiple times in this draft. That's kind of where I'm standing in terms of that. But Yeah, man, I think to answer your question, all things point towards the draft for me at this point.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I think, I kind of like it because in free agency, you can find some gems. And we've seen some of those gems happen before. But in the draft is where those elite guys are. That's where you can get them. That's where you can mold them. And especially in this deep class of tight ends and wide receivers, I mean, why wouldn't you opt for the draft? I, in recent days, have become fond. Not that I already, didn't like him already, but Laviska Shenault, man, he's starting to become a guy that I think not a lot of people are talking about. I'm hearing a lot of T. Higgins, Jalen Reagor. I'm hearing a lot of, maybe Denzel Mims. I'm starting to think Laviska Shenault. I think he's a guy that Chris Ballard loves. I think he's a guy, with afterburners that he has, the playmaking, the hands. I think that's a guy that Chris Ballard is going to love. At the tight end position, this is another great draft to take a tight end. The two main tight ends I really, really want right now are either Cole Kmet or Thaddeus Moss, because those are two guys that when I think about the tight end position, I'm just thinking of those two guys completely obliterating teams.
Yeah.
I just don't know why. Bryson Hopkins, I like him. I don't think of him much as a blocker, but as a route runner, he's really good. Hunter Bryant, like you said a couple of weeks ago, he could literally just transition over to wide receiver. So when it comes to tight end, I think it's smart to avoid free agency, to add skill players, go to the draft. And when you said trade back, I almost want to make this a guarantee that Chris Ballard is going to make a trade in the draft. And I think he's going to trade back because I believe other than his first season in the draft, he did not trade back. And then his second season, we all know that big trade with the Jets last year. He traded out of the first round. He also traded Hassan Ridgeway to the Eagles for another 6th round pick, I believe. So this season, to maybe gain a little bit more draft capital, I think he's going to trade back. I don't know. This is what we don't know, where he's going to do it. I would envision it'll probably be in the 3rd or 4th round because I think he does want to add more guys. Like you said, you need O-line depth. You need wide receiver. You need tight end. You might want to bring in another corner. Hell, you might want to think about an edge rusher, maybe. So there's things that Chris Ballard wants to add. So now I think I like where we stand right now. There's still people out there talking about Jadeveon Clowney with the Colts. I've thought about it. I've talked to myself about it. I'm out. I don't want him. I've gone back and forth, he would be great. I think, oh, no, he would do this, he would do that. I'm out, man. I am out. The only reason why he's not signed is because teams are not going to offer him $20 million that he wants. And I mean, it's crazy for him to go out there and say he doesn't want to be on a sorry team. He wants to be on a contender. He wants to be on a good team when he hasn't recorded double-digit sacks. So
right.
I just wanted to throw that in there for anyone watching the show who's curious about where we stand with Jadeveon Clowney. I don't want him. So if you want to give some thoughts on Jadeveon Clowney right now, I mean, you can. The floor is yours, Cody.
Yeah. I think for sure I'm not going to sign him for that much money. I don't know. Like, part of me is like, I would like him because I think he's a solid pass rusher, but he's also not, like you mentioned, hasn't put up double-digit sacks, and he's a good run defender, I think. But, I don't know. Just for the price tag, I probably would say no at this point. Just, if it was for like a short-term, not breaking the bank type of deal, I'd be okay with it. But, yeah, right now I'm just kind of like, he's not – I mean, he's a good player. I think he is. But I think just for what he's asking, the production that he's put up, I just think it doesn't match right now. But, maybe he comes down and but it doesn't sound like he's going to. But I think I think kind of what Jadeveon Clowney's wanting and kind of what the Colts would be wanting are probably a little bit different. And so, yeah, I'm probably going to say no on him just from from rumors of what he's been asking. Probably not.
Yeah. So we'll just go ahead and leave it at that because it's not even something worth quite a bit of time to talk about. So that we're just going to go ahead and leave it at that. So things have happened. A week and a half, nearly 2 weeks into free agency. I think it's already been 2 weeks, 2 weeks into free agency, things have happened in the AFC South. The Jaguars, they're trying to find a trade partner for Yannick Ngakoue. They traded away Calais Campbell. They lost a couple guys. The Texans, they made the stupidest trade in NFL history, trading DeAndre Hopkins for a ham sandwich and getting a 4th-round pick out of it. And they also lost DJ Reader, who's a big part of their defensive line. Then you look at the Tennessee Titans. Logan Ryan is currently not re-signing with the Tennessee Titans. They added Vic Beasley, who I do like. So where do you see the Colts standing in the AFC South? Where do you see them, right now you got to think it's up in the air. It's there's no clear-cut there's no clear-cut favorite. So I want to go ahead and give you the floor on this right now. So take it away.
Yeah. And also, Tennessee basically traded away. You mentioned trading guys for nothing. Traded away Jarrell Casey for like a 7th-round pick or something stupid like that. So he's a big loss as well there at the Tennessee defensive line. I mean, it's crazy to just kind of see. I would argue, man, a couple of years ago, you would have said the Colts have the worst defensive line, bar none. Like, it's not even close. But now, like, it's wild to see all these guys out of the AFC South, really good to elite defensive linemen just gone. And it's crazy, man. Like you mentioned, now the Texans really have J.J. Watt, who doesn't play 16 games most of the time. He's up there in age. I mean, they don't really have anybody on their defensive line that scares you much. Tennessee, they obviously added Vic Beasley, but like beyond that, man, like what do they really have? Maybe Harold Landry. I don't know. They drafted a guy last year, I believe it was. His name's escaping me right now, but defensive lineman there.
Charles Aminu.
Yeah. Didn't they draft the guy a couple years ago too? Defensive tackle. I can't remember his name. Anyway, regardless.
Christian Wilkins, I believe. No,
it wasn't Christian Wilkins.
It was a guy from.
What was his name?
Right.
Yeah, he was injured, I think, and they drafted him. Oh, but anyway, there's not a whole lot of proven guys there on the Tennessee defensive line. Obviously, we talked about Jacksonville just kind of imploding on defense. Yannick Ngakoue will probably be traded, so they have Josh Allen and who else at this point. So yeah, man, it's kind of crazy. It's kind of up in the air now. If you're making me choose, I have to go with the quarterback, and but it's tough because, like you mentioned, Houston lost a lot of those guys, a lot of key pieces there. And then Tennessee, I would say if I have to choose one, probably Tennessee, just because they went the furthest in the playoffs last year. They didn't really lose a lot compared to like the other teams in the AFC South, besides the Colts. And so probably Tennessee is the early favorite there, just because they have their quarterback, one of the best running backs in the league in Derrick Henry. They have some good players on that offense and defense still. So yeah, I mean, I would say Tennessee is probably the favorite, but like you mentioned, it's really up in the air at this point. I probably would take Jacksonville out of it because they're just kind of like rebuilding at this point.
Yeah.
But between the three teams there, Houston, Tennessee, and Indianapolis, it's kind of up in the air. It really is. It's just kind of like what's going to happen here. We have no idea. I think the Colts have potential to definitely win the AFC South. And I think that Houston's definitely doing them favors a lot, and it'll be interesting to watch with Tennessee this last year. They had some good battles there. So, yeah, man, I'm kind of like not sure right now, but that's definitely an exciting thing when you have no idea who's going to win the division. Like, it's so much more exciting than, New England for the past 20 years, where they're going to win the division, kind of like who's going to maybe be in the wild card round. I like this. I think it's super exciting.
Yeah, man. I liked what you said about the AFC South. You made some really good points. When I look at the AFC South, I'm with you. I'm dropping Jacksonville out of it. I'm surprised Doug Marrone actually survived as the head coach. And now, they lost Calais Campbell. Yannick Ngakoue still needs to be traded. Lost a couple of other pieces. So, we don't know where they're at. They traded A.J. Boye away, their other good corner, and now they have no corners. So now when you look at the AFC South, you look at Indy, you look at Houston, you look at Tennessee. You look at Houston. Deshaun Watson is still there. Kenny Stills, Will Fuller, Kiki Kuti. Their offensive line kind of needs to get a little bit better. David Johnson, you don't know if he's ever going to be good again. And then when you look at their defense, lost Jadeveon Clowney, lost DJ Reader. Then you lost a couple of other guys, and now Houston's always has a great front seven defense. Now they might get a little bit weaker. They just might get a little bit weaker, and the Colts with that offensive line and Tennessee could probably wear Houston down. Now I'm looking at Tennessee and Indianapolis, and I think I got to go Tennessee. I'm with you. They just went to the AFC Championship game. They were close to going to the Super Bowl. And, I'm just going to go with the team that's proven it, that's done it, that's gotten to the AFC Championship, that shows they can win. And, this isn't like, I guess you could say, insulting or knocking the Indianapolis Colts. No. The Tennessee is a good team. They just lost Jarrell Casey. And they added Vic Beasley. Jarrell Casey is a big loss, though. Vic Beasley, he's going to be serviceable. Tennessee still has good skill position players. They still got that offensive line, Derrick Henry. So you have all that. And when you look at Indianapolis, we love the moves that they've made. But we got to wait and see how it plays out on the field. We got to see how they look in training camp, preseason games. We got to look at all of that. So now we since we're talking about all this and everything, I definitely think that Tennessee should be the favorite. They deserve to be the favorite. And Indianapolis, I'm really pulling for them. In my heart of hearts, I really honestly believe Indianapolis will win the AFC South. But we got to see what goes on with this quarterback position. And speaking of the quarterback position, this will be our last segment of the show, guys. We know what we're probably getting in Phillip Rivers. I wrote an article a couple of days ago talking about Jacoby Brissett and can he prove that, he can be the guy for Indianapolis. Maybe not Andrew Luck status, but certainly a lot better than he played last year. Here's my take on Jacoby Brissett. In the heat of the moment, everything else, I have said I've moved on from Jacoby Brissett. And right now I can say I probably have. I still am. But let's not forget that some of the things that happened to the Colts was not completely Jacoby Brissett's fault. He wasn't the one making Adam Vinatieri miss kicks, cost us points, cost us about 3 games. And he didn't ask for the injuries to Eric Ebron, T.Y. Hilton, Devin Funchess, Paris Campbell, Marlon Mack, Ryan Kelly. He didn't ask for these injuries. I want to see if Jacoby Brissett can work his way back. I want to see if he, whatever he's got to do, get in the film room with Frank Reich, dissect his game film if they haven't even done it already. Get in there, get on the field, don't hesitate. It seems to be a mental game with Jacoby. I think he has the arm. I think the accuracy is there, but it's somewhat of a mental game that he has got, a mental hurdle that he has got to overcome. if he can do these things, if he can have a healthy team, I would really love to replay this 2019 season. I really would. You know, there's some things that he does struggle with, but I want to see what he does in training camp. Because right now, without even touching a football yet, Phillip Rivers is already thrusted into the starting role. I wonder how that makes Jacoby feel and how motivated he is, whether if he's working harder in the weight room, film room, football field, you know, whatever he's doing. Where are you at? What do you think about Jacoby Brissett? Because right now it looks like the Colts are going to keep him. If we're going to bring in a rookie, I don't see Chris Ballard probably taking a guy high, if I'm being honest. If Jordan Love falls to that 34 spot, maybe you take him. Now I'm starting to think New England will be right there for the taking for him. But I do love Steven Montez from Colorado. He does have a good arm. He has arm strength, good accuracy. That's a guy I think you could bring in. But with Jacoby Brissett, where are you at with Jacoby Brissett right now? Do you think he can work his way back, you know, redeem himself? Where are you at with him?
That's a good question. Yeah, I think there certainly were factors last year, like you mentioned, the injuries and different stuff like that, being just let know you're the starting quarterback a couple weeks before the season starts. That's certainly something, but yeah, I don't know. I think it's more, like you said, more of a mental thing with him. I think he has some traits that you like in a quarterback, but like you said, there's just, for some reason, there's certain things that he won't do and things that you need to do to be a good quarterback in the league. And maybe if he can fix those, he can be. I mean, I just kind of look at him as like a backup guy, and he's a free agent after this year. So maybe he shows you something, especially if Phillip Rivers turns out to not be good. But yeah, I'm just kind of like, at this point, he's 27. He's had some years now to kind of develop, and I haven't really seen a lot of development from him in terms of like improvement. There's been some things, but you know, it's always like for some reason, he always it seems like he starts out pretty decent. We saw that both years. And then for whatever reason, he just kind of, I don't know what it is really, but something mental happens where he just kind of drops off. And I don't know. I just am kind of to the point where, you know, there were factors for sure, but you know, when you're a starting quarterback in the league, it doesn't matter who your players are that you're throwing the ball to, you got to make them better. And I just think that's something that Jacoby Brissett has not been able to do. He hasn't really been able to elevate his game to that point. And so I'm not really sold on him. I'm kind of like, we kind of know what he is at this point. And I think that's just a serviceable backup that can maybe win you a game or two. That's just kind of where I'm at, but it is a bummer because I feel like he has a lot of physical traits that you look for in quarterback. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with Jacoby Brissett.
Yeah, definitely. And I want to make this clear. In no way am I trying to gun for Jacoby Brissett to be the franchise quarterback. I'm not trying to do any of that. I'm with you. He lacks some things. And like, you know, there is no excuse at the end of the day, because we saw what Andrew Luck had to deal with at his wide receiver core, and he still balled out. And that's just the standard that you have to live up to. And you know, I'm kind of like, I want to at least give him a shot, because he was just thrown out of the way. And I just want to see, I'm curious, because, you know, I'm kind of a competitive guy myself. And I want to think to myself, if this happened to me, what would I do? You know, am I working harder, or am I just, you know, relaxing? I was curious with that, because you know, we don't know about Jacoby Brissett in terms of what his future is with the Colts. So I'm with you.
Yeah.
We kind of already know what he is. You know, this is the NFL. It doesn't work this way, but I would just love to see this 2019 season restart over. But hey, if we end up trading him away, cool. You know, we gain draft capital. I'm rooting for the guy. I hope, you know, everything works out. But right now, man, I'm excited for this Colts team right now. The defense is looking solid. Now we just gotta improve this offense now. The NFL came out and said the draft will go on April 23rd through the 25th. So now I think as Colts fans, we now turn our attention back to the NFL draft. We are little under, a month away. Let me see here. I believe we are 27 days away from the NFL draft. So it's time, man. It's coming. Time is moving fast.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So, Cody, do you have anything else?
No, just be exciting to kind of see what the draft holds for the Colts. It's going to be interesting, but I'm excited for it.
Awesome, man. All right. Well, we don't have anything else for you guys. So thank you for tuning in for another episode of the Colts Brawl podcast. Check us out on Twitter. If you haven't already, my handle is Underdog Sports 4. And Cody, yours is
at CP Felger 55, and then at Colts Brawl.
Awesome. Yes. Don't forget about our Colts Brawl Twitter page. So guys, thank you again for tuning in. Y'all have a blessed weekend. Stay safe. Wash your hands. Stay inside. Don't go to the beach. And y'all stay blessed out there.